Chapter 8 covers two ratios. Both are very important ratios, and both of these ratios measure how profitable the company is. The first one, return on equity. The numerator is net income minus preferred dividends, and the denominator is the average common shareholders' equity. So the average common shareholders' equity, we've had the average, we've used averages before in our ratios. So whenever we have an average, that means we need the amount of common shareholders' equity for the beginning of the year and the amount at the end of the year, and we divide that by 2, and that's the number that we use for our denominator here. And this ratio is measuring the amount of income the company is making for every dollar that the common shareholder has invested in the company. It's measuring the return that the common shareholder is getting on their investment in this company. That's why we take out the preferred dividends in the numerator, because the common shareholders will not get any return on this business until the preferred shareholders are paid. So we take out preferred shareholders in the numerator, and the denominator does not have the preferred equity, shareholders' equity in it. It's just the common shareholders' equity. So that's all the equity in the company, all the shareholders' equity minus the preferred equity. And again, it's the amount of income earned with every dollar that the common shareholder has invested in the company. The amount of income earned. That's return on equity. So would you want a higher number? Would you want a higher return on equity or a lower return on equity? Which would be better? A higher one. The higher it is, that means the more return that the common shareholders are getting on their investment. You want that to be high. This is a profitability ratio, so the higher the ratio, the better. The second ratio is earnings per share. Earnings per share is probably the most important ratio that we'll learn this whole semester. It's very important. It's so important, in fact, that GAAP, the accounting rules, generally accepted accounting principles, require that all publicly traded companies report this amount. They have to report their earnings per share on their income statement. All publicly traded companies have to report this ratio. This is the only ratio that they have to report on the face of their income statement. And all companies have to report earnings per share on the face of their income statement. And the way you calculate it is net income minus preferred dividends. So the numerator is the same as for both of these. The denominator is not a dollar amount. It's the weighted average number of common shares outstanding. Weighted average. So we want to look at how many shares the company had outstanding. If it was the same amount of shares all year long, then that's the amount of shares that we're going to use in the denominator. But if they had a certain number of shares outstanding, for a part of the year, then we're going to weight that. So we're going to, like, if they had, the book has 100,000 shares for the first 3 months of the year, so we would take 100,000 and multiply that by 3 divided by 12, weighted average. And then if the company issued another 10,000 shares for the remainder of the year, then they had 110,000 outstanding for 9 out of the 12 months. So it's a weighted average. We had to use weighted averages when we were calculating using the weighted average inventory method. So you should remember how to calculate the weighted average. That looks at the number of shares outstanding and how long that number of shares was outstanding. This ratio also measures the profitability of the firm, but it's looking at the earnings that the common shareholders are making on each share. So what is the company earning? The earnings per share of common stock outstanding. And this is important because if you're an investor in a company and you see that the company has net income that continues to go up, You know, over the years of the company, if you go back 5 years in a company and you're the investor and you see income is increasing all 5 years, you may think, oh wow, this is really good. But your earnings per share may not be increasing because that net income may be divided over a lot more shareholders. So just because net income is increasing for a company doesn't necessarily mean that your investment is better, because it could be that net income could be diluted because the company may have issued a whole bunch more common shares. So it would be spread out. Your portion of the net income would be spread out over more shareholders. And when we were talking about treasury stock, we said one reason that a company would buy back their own stock is to impact the earnings per share dollar, this ratio. And that's because if they buy back their shares of stock, that decreases this number. Because any treasury stock, any amount that they buy back, that decreases this denominator. It's no longer outstanding. So the company, by buying back treasury stock, could actually increase their earnings per share without changing net income.